Before any facts are discussed, before timelines are clarified or evidence is examined, there is one reality that cannot be ignored. Lives were lost, families were changed forever, and behind every technical detail of this investigation is a tragedy that deserves care, patience, and accuracy. That is where this story begins. On behalf of the National Transportation Safety Board, officials opened this briefing with a solemn message, extending their deepest condolences to the families and loved ones affected by this devastating accident. The loss is profound, and the weight of it is not lost on the investigators tasked with uncovering what happened. The NTSB's Transportation Disaster Assistance Team remains in direct contact with family members, offering support while also coordinating the difficult process of gathering information during an incredibly painful time. Investigators also expressed gratitude to the families who, despite their grief, have assisted the team as the investigation unfolds. From the outset, the NTSB made one thing clear. This phase of the investigation is focused on collecting perishable evidence. This is the most time-sensitive stage, where physical clues, environmental conditions, and witness accounts must be documented before they fade or are altered. Only after this evidence is secured does the analysis phase begin. That analysis will be thorough, methodical, and systematic, with every piece of information evaluated as a potential factor in determining the probable cause of the accident. Importantly, officials emphasized that everything shared during this briefing is preliminary and subject to change as new facts are confirmed. Investigators then clarified details that had been discussed the previous day. The aircraft departed from Runway 10 at Statesville Regional Airport and remained airborne for approximately 10 minutes. It then attempted to return to the same airport, aiming to land on Runway 28. At this stage, the NTSB does not know why the aircraft attempted to return. The flight was operating under Part 91 as a general aviation flight, and determining what prompted the return is now a central focus of the investigation. One of the most sensitive points addressed involved a question about passenger communication during the flight. The NTSB confirmed it is aware of one brief text message sent from a passenger on board to a family member. The message read simply, "Emergency landing." Investigators are not aware of any additional messages or communications sent from the aircraft to people on the ground. This single text is now part of the evidence being reviewed, though officials cautioned against drawing conclusions from it alone. At the same time, investigators are still gathering information about the pilots on board. At this point, they have not confirmed who was seated in the left seat, which is typically the position of the pilot in command. Officials expect more complete pilot-related information to be included in the preliminary report once identities, roles, and certifications are fully verified. Witness accounts are also playing an important role. The NTSB confirmed that several witness statements have been collected and are still being analyzed and validated. Early indications from multiple sources suggest the aircraft appeared stable on approach. It was configured for landing, with landing lights on, but it was flying lower than expected. This observation aligns with the debris field and the first points of impact, which were identified on approach lighting structures approximately 1,800 feet from the runway threshold. That low approach and what caused it now sits at the center of an investigation that is only just beginning. As investigators work to understand why the aircraft was flying lower than expected on approach, the focus has expanded to everything happening on the ground in the immediate aftermath. The debris field and initial impact points are not just physical evidence, they are a timeline frozen in place, offering clues about the final moments of the flight. According to the NTSB, these findings closely match witness descriptions, reinforcing early observations without yet explaining the underlying cause. Officials then detailed the scope of the investigative work already completed and what continues on site. The systems group spent the previous day documenting the debris field in detail, carefully mapping aircraft wreckage positions, identifying component locations, and examining the flight control system. This documentation is critical as it allows investigators to reconstruct the aircraft's configuration and movement leading up to the crash. One of the most significant recoveries was the cockpit voice recorder. Although the aircraft was not required to carry a CVR due to its Part 91 status, one was installed and successfully retrieved. That recorder has already been transported to NTSB headquarters in Washington, D.C., where specialists are attempting to extract usable data. Investigators emphasized that even damaged recorders can still provide valuable information, and their laboratory teams are highly experienced in recovering data under challenging conditions. In addition to the cockpit voice recorder, the team recovered multiple avionics components from the aircraft. These include the ground proximity warning system, a Garmin G750 multifunction display, and several cockpit instruments. The caution and warning panel from the instrument panel was also retained for examination. All of these components are being sent to the NTSB's Recorders Lab, where experts will determine whether data can be downloaded and analyzed. If successful, that data could help clarify aircraft performance, alerts received by the crew, and situational awareness in the moments before impact. While systems specialists focused on the aircraft itself, the operations group conducted extensive interviews. These included witnesses and maintenance personnel connected to the aircraft. Investigators also reviewed additional accident footage and security video from the area. As of the briefing, the NTSB confirmed that maintenance logs for the aircraft are now in their possession. These records will be used to verify the aircraft's maintenance history, determine its weight and balance, and confirm how it was loaded at the time of the flight. At the same time, the power plants group examined both engines. Initial examinations took place on scene, and plans were made to relocate the engines for more detailed analysis. Engine performance is a critical piece of the puzzle, and investigators will be looking for any signs of mechanical failure, abnormal operation, or damage patterns that could explain what happened during the approach. The NTSB also deployed its drone team to document the accident site from the air. Although high winds limited what could be accomplished initially, investigators were still able to capture useful video footage and complete documentation of the scene. With that work largely complete, the next phase involves record recovery and removal of the aircraft from the airport. Officials indicated that this process would begin soon and that the scene is expected to be released to local authorities within 1 to 2 days. Before moving on, investigators took time to thank the public. Videos, photos, witness statements, and other documentation submitted by members of the community have already proven helpful. The NTSB urged anyone with additional information to come forward by contacting their official witness email address. Every detail, no matter how small it may seem, could contribute to understanding the sequence of events. As the briefing continued, officials made an important announcement. This would be the final on-site press briefing in North Carolina. However, they stressed that the investigation itself is far from over. Even though this marked the final on-site press briefing, investigators were careful to emphasize that their work in Statesville was not complete. Teams would remain on the ground as long as necessary to gather remaining evidence and verify critical details. The difference now is that future updates will come directly from NTSB headquarters in Washington, D.C., rather than from the scene itself. Officials encouraged the public and the media to follow official NTSB channels for accurate updates, including their website and social media platforms. As a reminder of how these investigations unfold, the NTSB outlined the expected timeline. A preliminary report will be released within 30 days, providing a factual summary of what is known so far. However, the final report, which includes the probable cause and contributing factors, typically takes between 12 and 18 months. This extended timeline reflects the depth of analysis required, ensuring that conclusions are based on verified data rather than early assumptions. Photos and video from the accident scene will also be made available on the NTSB website for public use. With those updates complete, the briefing shifted into a question-and-answer session. Reporters focused immediately on one of the most pressing issues, whether witnesses or video footage suggested the aircraft was experiencing distress beyond simply flying low. NTSB officials acknowledged that they have reviewed several videos and spoken with multiple witnesses, including individuals with aviation experience. At this point, however, there is no clear evidence indicating a specific emergency occurring on board. What the footage does show is that the aircraft appeared properly configured for landing, yet consistently lower than a normal glide path. That low approach is visible not only in witness videos, but also in the physical evidence. The aircraft's contact with approach lighting structures confirms that it was at or below runway level well before reaching the threshold. Despite this, investigators cautioned against drawing conclusions too early. The presence of a low approach does not, by itself, explain why the aircraft was in that position or what conditions led up to it. Another question followed quickly: just how low was the aircraft? The answer provided important context. Investigators explained that the aircraft was below the standard glide slope for the airport. Because the runway itself sits slightly elevated on a hill, the approach lighting structures are roughly level with, and in some cases slightly above, the surrounding terrain. The fact that the aircraft struck these structures indicates it was essentially level with or below the runway surface at that point in the approach. Pinpointing the exact altitude and descent profile will require further analysis. Attention then returned to the brief text message sent from the aircraft. A reporter asked who received the message and which passenger sent it. The NTSB declined to share those details, citing respect for the family's privacy during an extremely difficult time. Officials emphasized their appreciation for the family's willingness to share that information at all, acknowledging the emotional weight behind such a decision. Another key question addressed why confirming the identity of the pilot in the left seat has taken time. Investigators explained that while they have strong information and are fairly confident about seating positions, accuracy is essential. Verification is critical, especially examining pilot actions, qualifications, and decision-making. Additionally, from a survival factors perspective, understanding where each occupant was seated is an important but challenging task in accidents of this severity. As questions continued, it became clear that while some answers are beginning to take shape, many of the most important ones still require careful, patient investigation. As the question-and-answer session moved forward, attention shifted to the airport environment itself and whether any external factors may have played a role. One reporter asked whether it was unusual for trees to be positioned so close to the runway and approach area. The NTSB acknowledged the question and referred back to observations shared during the previous day's briefing. The airport, investigators explained, sits on top of a hill, which affects how the approach area is structured. The approach lighting system at this airport is generally level with the runway surface, and in some areas may even sit slightly higher depending on the terrain. Beyond those lights, the land dips down and trees are present in the lower areas between lighting structures. This layout helps explain how the aircraft could be well below the runway surface at the point of impact. When investigators say the aircraft was low, they mean significantly lower than where it should have been during a stabilized approach. Understanding this terrain is important, but officials stressed that the presence of trees alone does not explain why the aircraft descended to that point. Another question focused on weather conditions and whether they may have made onboard warning systems more critical. Specifically, a reporter asked if the conditions at the time would have required increased reliance on the ground proximity warning system. The NTSB responded carefully, noting that while weather is always examined, they do not yet have enough information to connect it directly to the accident. Investigators confirmed that they have reviewed available weather data, video footage, and reports from the airport's weather reporting station. At the time of the accident, conditions were reported as 1,200 feet broken clouds with 5 statute miles of visibility. These conditions fall under visual flight rules, meaning they were generally considered flyable without instrument-only guidance. However, there was also light to moderate drizzle in the area, which could affect visibility and depth perception. How or if these conditions influence the flight remains part of the ongoing investigation. At this stage, officials made it clear that they would not speculate on how the weather interacted with the aircraft systems or the crew's decision-making. The role of systems like the ground proximity warning device will be examined once data is recovered from the avionics and warning panels. Until that analysis is complete, drawing connections would be premature. What became increasingly clear during the briefing is how interconnected every element of the investigation is. Aircraft configuration, pilot actions, weather conditions, airport design, and onboard systems all feed into a single timeline. Investigators are working to assemble that timeline piece by piece, resisting pressure to jump ahead of the facts. The NTSB reiterated why patience is essential in investigations like this. Early evidence can suggest patterns, but only detailed analysis can confirm whether those patterns are meaningful. Something as simple as an aircraft flying low could be caused by multiple factors, including mechanical issues, human error, environmental conditions, or a combination of several elements. As the final questions wrapped up, officials maintained a consistent message. The investigation is active, evidence collection is ongoing, and conclusions will only be drawn once all available data has been carefully reviewed. They reminded the public that speculation, especially in the early stages, can be misleading and harmful to both the investigation and the families involved. With no further questions, the briefing began to draw to a close. What remained was a clear picture of a process that values accuracy over speed and facts over assumptions. The next steps would happen quietly, away from cameras and press briefings, inside labs and analysis rooms, where data would speak louder than theories. And as the investigators turned back to their work, the central question remained unanswered, but not ignored. With the press briefing officially concluded, the investigation moved into a quieter but more critical phase. Away from microphones and cameras, the real work now centers on verification, reconstruction, and analysis. Every recovered component, every witness statement, and every digital trace must be examined together to form a complete and accurate picture of what happened during those final minutes of flight. At NTSB headquarters, specialists are now focused on extracting data from the recovered equipment. This process is far from simple. Many of the devices retrieved from the aircraft were damaged during the impact, but that does not make them useless. The NTSB's Recorders Laboratory specializes in recovering information from compromised avionics, often pulling critical data from systems that appear beyond repair. If successful, this data may reveal altitude trends, system warnings, pilot inputs, or other indicators that help explain why the aircraft descended below a normal glide path. At the same time, investigators are reviewing maintenance records in detail. These logs are not just paperwork, they are a history of the aircraft's condition and care. By reviewing inspection schedules, repairs, and component replacements, investigators can confirm whether the aircraft was airworthy and properly maintained. Weight and balance calculations are also being verified to ensure the aircraft was loaded within approved limits, as improper loading can significantly affect handling and descent characteristics. The engines, now relocated for further examination, are being analyzed independently of the rest of the wreckage. Investigators will assess internal components, impact damage, and signs of power at the time of the crash. Even subtle markings inside an engine can indicate whether it was producing thrust or experiencing issues during the approach. This level of detail helps rule out or confirm mechanical factors without relying on assumptions. Equally important is the human side of the investigation. Pilot qualifications, recent flight activity, training history, and medical certification are all reviewed carefully. Investigators are also working to confirm seating positions and crew roles. While this may seem like a small detail, it directly affects how actions and responsibilities are interpreted. In accidents involving severe damage, reconstructing who was seated where becomes more challenging, but it remains essential for understanding decision-making and control inputs. Witness statements continue to be reviewed alongside video footage. Investigators are careful not to treat any single account as definitive. Instead, they look for consistency across multiple sources. When witness observations align with physical evidence and recorded data, they become more meaningful. When they conflict, investigators dig deeper to understand why. This cross-checking process helps eliminate errors caused by perspective, distance, or stress at the time of the event. One key principle guiding the investigation is restraint. The NTSB repeatedly emphasized that early indicators do not equal conclusions. The aircraft flying low, the emergency landing text, and the weather conditions are all pieces of a much larger puzzle. None of them alone explain the accident. Only by combining technical data, environmental factors, and human performance analysis can investigators identify the probable cause. As this work continues, the families of those lost remain at the center of the process. The NTSB's approach is designed not only to determine what happened, but to do so with integrity and care. Rushing conclusions would serve no one. Accuracy, even when it takes time, is the priority. And while public updates may slow, the investigation itself is accelerating behind the scenes, moving steadily toward answers that are grounded in evidence, not speculation. As the investigation progresses behind closed doors, the public-facing timeline becomes quieter, but the work itself grows more precise. Each department within the NTSB now contributes its findings to a shared framework, where no single piece of evidence stands alone. Data from avionics is compared against engine examinations. Witness observations are measured against physical damage. Weather reports are weighed alongside pilot actions. This layered approach is what transforms fragments into understanding. In the coming weeks, investigators will begin assembling the preliminary report. This document will not assign blame or offer conclusions. Instead, it will present verified facts: the flight's path, the aircraft's configuration, environmental conditions, and confirmed details about the crew and aircraft systems. Its purpose is transparency, allowing the public to see what has been established so far while making it clear that the investigation is still ongoing. Beyond that preliminary stage lies the longer process of analysis. Human factors specialists will examine decision-making under pressure. Systems experts will study whether alerts, warnings, or equipment behavior played a role. Survival factors investigators will assess how impact forces and aircraft structure affected occupants. Each discipline looks at the same event through a different lens, ensuring that no contributing factor is overlooked. Throughout this process, the NTSB maintains a firm commitment to independence. Investigators do not represent airlines, manufacturers, or regulators. Their responsibility is solely to the facts and to preventing future tragedies. The goal is not just to understand what went wrong in this case, but to identify lessons that can improve safety across aviation as a whole. Public interest in accidents like this is understandable. Questions arise quickly, and speculation often fills the silence between updates. But the NTSB has been clear from the beginning. Answers must come from evidence, not assumptions. Even compelling details like the brief emergency text or the aircraft's low approach cannot be interpreted in isolation. Context matters, and context takes time to build. As months pass and analysis continues, investigators will eventually reach conclusions supported by data, testing, and expert review. When the final report is released, likely 12 to 18 months from now, it will outline the probable cause and any contributing factors, along with safety recommendations if warranted. These recommendations are often the most impactful outcome of an investigation, shaping procedures, training, or equipment standards to reduce the risk of similar accidents in the future. Until then, the work continues steadily and deliberately. Teams remain focused, evidence-driven, and aware of the responsibility they carry. For the families who lost loved ones, the wait for answers is painful. For investigators, that reality reinforces the importance of getting it right. This case is not defined by speculation or headlines. It is defined by careful documentation, disciplined analysis, and respect for those affected. While many questions remain unanswered, they are not being ignored. They are being addressed one by one with patience and precision. And in that process, quiet, methodical, and unwavering, the pursuit of truth moves forward, ensuring that when answers do come, they are worthy of the lives that were lost.
We are here today to provide an update on the investigation into the accident.